The haunting mystery of Bhangarh Fort. The wind howled through the ruins of Bhangarh Fort, whispering secrets of an age-old curse. The towering walls, once a symbol of power and prosperity, now stood in eerie silence under the pale moonlight. The fort, abandoned for centuries, had long been a place of fear, where even the bravest refused to tread after sunset. The villagers of Bhangarh had one warning: never stay in the fort after dark. But for Aryan, Vikram, Priya, and Rahul, the thrill of the unknown was too tempting to resist. Ignoring the trembling warnings of an old villager, they pushed open the rusted iron gates and stepped inside. Dust swirled beneath their feet, and the air smelled of decay and time long forgotten. Priya, the most reluctant of the group, hesitated at the entrance. They said, "I don't feel right about this," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the wind. Vikram laughed, brushing off her fears. "It's just an old fort, Priya. Don't let silly ghost stories get to you." The deeper they ventured inside, the more unnatural the silence became. The usual sounds of insects or distant night animals were absent, leaving an oppressive stillness that clung to the air. Their flashlight beams flickered against the crumbling walls, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and move on their own. Then, something changed. The temperature dropped suddenly, making them shiver. Aryan, the most fearless among them, smirked and called out mockingly, "Singhia! If you're still here, show yourself!" His voice echoed, bouncing off the ruins before fading into silence. At first, nothing happened. Then, the lantern flickered. A cold gust of wind swept through the corridors, carrying a whisper so faint it was almost indistinguishable from the wind itself. But Priya heard it clearly. "Leave!" Rahul's hands trembled slightly as he gripped his flashlight. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice hushed. No one answered, but their uneasy glances confirmed that they had. The group moved forward cautiously, their steps now hesitant. As they turned a corner, Vikram froze. "Guys, look!" At the end of the passage, in the dim glow of the lantern, a shadow stood. Tall and twisted, its form barely human, its hollow eyes reflecting the flickering light. It stood motionless, watching. Then, without warning, it moved fast. The figure darted into the corridor with an unnatural speed, disappearing into the darkness. Rahul cursed under his breath, his heart pounding. That was not the wind. The group turned to run, but before they could, Aryan gasped, his body convulsing violently. His feet lifted off the ground, as if some unseen force had seized him by the throat. His eyes rolled back, his mouth opening in a silent scream. Vikram and Rahul lunged forward to grab him, but a deafening, inhuman shriek filled the air, making them stagger back in horror. The shriek echoed through the fort, not just from one place, but from every direction, as if the very walls of Bhangarh were screaming. Aryan's body twisted mid-air before he was suddenly dropped to the stone floor with a sickening thud. Priya let out a horrified sob as she knelt beside him, shaking his shoulders. "Aryan, wake up!" The shadows around them seemed to stretch and pulse, closing in. The whispering voices turned into tortured wails. The fort was awake. Panic surged through them. Vikram grabbed Aryan's limp form, slinging him over his shoulder. "Run!" he shouted. They sprinted toward the entrance, the darkness around them shifting, closing in as if the walls themselves wanted to trap them forever. Shadows reached for them, their fingers stretching unnaturally long. The exit was right there, but it felt impossibly far. With one final desperate push, they burst through the iron gates. The moment they crossed the threshold, the doors behind them slammed shut with a thunderous boom. The night was suddenly still again. Aryan lay motionless on the ground, his breathing ragged. The others surrounded him, their hands shaking as they tried to wake him. Then, without warning, he gasped, sitting up abruptly. His breathing was heavy, his eyes unfocused. At first, they were relieved, until they saw his eyes. They were darker, emptier. The Aryan they knew was gone. He stared at them, his lips curving into a slow, unsettling smile, the kind of smile that didn't belong to him. Then he spoke, his voice layered with something else, something inhuman. "We should go back inside." A chilling laugh escaped his lips, one that belonged to no man. In that moment, Vikram, Priya, and Rahul realized they had brought something back with them. Some say the curse of Bhangarh Fort still lingers. Some say the spirits of the dead still roam its halls, looking for new souls to claim. But one thing remains certain: no one who enters Bhangarh after dark ever leaves the same.